Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Raw Roundup on the Daily Express. We are joined by Richard Palmer, who is in Kenya as we speak on the Royal Tour, and he's going to be bringing all of the exclusive lines for us today, whereas he is quite literally minute by minute bringing the news stories back to the UK and back to the Daily Express. So any questions you have about the Royal Tour today, then do pop them in the comment section and then we can get them answered for you. But Richard, first of all, welcome from Kenya. I'm in London. There is so much going on. There's so many pictures and videos we've seen so far coming from the tour. The overall coverage has seemed to be pretty positive so far. But there have been a few tricky issues along the way which needed to be addressed, which seem to have been in a speech by the King. I think we do have that speech here, if we can bring it up, please.
It is the intimacy of our shared history that has brought our people together. However, we must also acknowledge the most painful times of our long and complex relationship. The wrongdoings of the past are a cause of the greatest sorrow and the deepest regret. There were abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against Kenyans as they waged, as you said at the United Nations, a painful struggle for independence and sovereignty. And for that, there can be no excuse. In coming back to Kenya, it matters greatly to me that I should deepen my own understanding of these wrongs, and that I meet some of those whose lives and communities were so grievously affected. None of this can change the past, but by addressing our history with honesty and openness, we can perhaps demonstrate the strength of our friendship today. And in so doing, we can, I hope, continue to build an ever closer bond for the years ahead.
There we go. There was the King addressing colonialism there. Well, as I said, we're joined by Richard, who is in Kenya live for us now. Richard, you were in this room when the speech happened. How was it received?
It was received very politely. Hello, by the way. I don't know if you've already apologized, but I think we're going to have a few technical problems here today. The Wi-Fi signal isn't on this. It was a very strong speech by the King. And it was received very politely by the 350 guests at the state banquet. There was also a very strong speech from the president of Kenya, who essentially called for further reparations from Britain for the colonial period. It's been a really funny mix of things going on this tour, I think, because first of all, I think you often get the feeling on these royal visits that ordinary people aren't that engaged with it, and I think they're aware that there's a royal visit on when just moaning about the traffic rather than always necessarily interested in every cough and splutter of what's going on. So I've very much picked up that sense from people on the streets and hearing on Twitter. But interest, and I think there's been some coverage in the Kenyan press as well, and a real mixed bag of reactions. Britain and Kenya have a very close relationship through the Commonwealth and through their shared. Both sides are keen for this celebration of relationship.
I think we may have lost Richard there. But the key points that we can take from Richard was that when the king did make his speech, it was very much positively received by the room, and that the Kenya and the royal family do have a very special relationship. Is the last thing I heard from you, Richard, before you went into darkness. So I think it might be a little bit like that today, but this is not his fault.
Yes, I'm afraid so. So yeah, there is a positive relationship, but I think the powers that be in Kenya, like some of the Caribbean countries, they are looking for further payments from the UK, I think, and in some other countries, from other European countries, to recognise the legacy of colonialism, and how they would argue that they were impoverished by that relationship. Personally, I think there are people who've been doing, some of the TV reporters have been doing vox pops with the public out on the streets, and I think it's fair to say I don't think there's a huge amount of anger out there on the streets, and I think people speak quite fondly of Britain, and the fact that they speak English here is the legacy, and English is a passport to other things in our modern world. It makes them more marketable as individuals, and also I think when people think about England and about the UK here, Premier League football is probably the first thing that comes to mind to most people, and that they're fanatical about football here. In many ways, what you hear out on the streets isn't reflected in what the president was saying the other night, where he's really seeking further concessions from the UK to reflect the bad side of colonialism. But my sense is that we've been talking about it on the tour among the journalists.
Oh, I think we just cut at the most needed time.
Have you lost? Did you lose me? Did you
lose Richard for a couple of seconds? We did lose you. Whilst we try.
Yeah, I think one argument that some of the journalists have been discussing is are we going? You've frozen again.
Yeah, we keep on losing.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Pandora?
Yeah, I can just about hear you. You were just about to say about the Germans. Whilst we try and get Richard back, let's have a look at what the Queen has been up to. She's been pictured in an elephant sanctuary, I think. So let's have a look here. I think she got gifted a painting. So there we are. She has been looking very happy. Some say some questionable dance moves yesterday. It has to be said I'm not sure if it was at the donkey sanctuary, but obviously this is not an elephant sanctuary, this is a donkey sanctuary. She did get some social media reaction, as it seems that when there's politicians or the royal family dance, people do seem to love it and do react to it in some kind of way. But I think we've got Richard back. Richard, you were just about to say German reaction, I think.
No. I think what I was saying was that we would. One of the questions is, every time members of the royal family now go to a Commonwealth country, are they going to be facing calls to apologise for things that happened 50, 60, 100 years ago? It does seem to be now for these Commonwealth tours for the royal family, and my sense is that the UK government, along with some of the other developed nations, I should say, is going to have to address this at some point in the future, possibly through the Commonwealth, that there probably needs to be some sort of Commonwealth fund that assists developing countries, some of the poorer countries in the Commonwealth, and that there's some sort of recognition that is in part reflecting what happened all those years ago, and is sort of a payment in recompense for that. And that's my personal view. But I mean, certainly at the moment, the UK government, I think, is set against that and doesn't want to apologise for things that happened in the past, but goes halfway down the route by, or maybe a bit further than that, by expressing regret. And clearly in the King's speech the other night, there was he used some very strong words, and he talked about his personal sorrow, about the abhorrent behaviour of the British here in the colonial period, when the Mau Mau uprising happened between 52 and 1960. So these are pictures of them arriving at the state banquet, coming down the red carpet with Maasai traditional dancers. It was very colourful. So it's a mixed view. I mean, I think they've been very well received here by the authorities, and ordinary people who have met them have been really seemed to enjoy it, and they've recognised the work that the King has done highlighting.
I think we might have lost Richard. Well, the last thing he said there was they recognised the work that the King has done, and that in his speech he did speak about the personal sorrow about some of the actions which took place. But as we saw from those pictures, they've been very, very well received at the banquet, and that the word is on the street, which is good, it seems, from all the places that they've been visiting, according to Richard. If you've got any comments about the Royal Tour whilst Richard is in Kenya live for us, then please do let us know. Richard, have they been apart, or have they very much stayed together, the King and Queen, or have they also been doing their own thing?
They've done solo engagements. They've split up during the day at times, and today, the third day. So I've been to the naval base, Tongi Naval Base in Mombasa earlier on, and Queen Camilla accompanied King Charles to that engagement, where they were looking at Kenyan Marines who've been trained by the Royal Marines to deal with Islamist violence, doing a training exercise. But after that, the Queen has retired essentially for the rest of the day. She's gone back and is doing some downtime. It's very hot and humid here. I mean, it was about 29 Celsius and 76% humidity when I was out a bit earlier. And she doesn't always thrive in very hot and humid weather. So I think they just possibly took a decision to let her have the rest of the afternoon off. And so the King has gone to a couple of beach areas to do things about marine conservation this afternoon. It was similar yesterday. I mean, they did their separate bits. I mean, it was a really fun day yesterday. I have to say, it was such a full day. I mean, I've been filing sort of every cough and splutter for the Express website as well as for the paper, and I think I sent 8 or 9 stories over yesterday, and then we had Kate out in North London, so I was writing about that from here. Yeah. and the king had recorded a video message for the Artificial Intelligence Summit that the Prime Minister has been hosting for world leaders in Bletchley Park in Milton Keynes. So I did a bit about that as well. So we've got William and Kate out again today. They're doing engagements in Scotland, and the first pictures from that.
So, Richard, I'm not sure if you can hear me. We hope Richard can. But we've been getting some questions in from the viewers on Twitter, Richard, and I think it was to do with the first subject which we spoke about today on the Royal Roundup, and that was the King's speech in Kenya, which was addressing colonialism. And he said, is he going to, Dor Lesser said, is he going to use his own money? I think I'll let you take that answer, Richard.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed most of that. Was somebody asking, is somebody going to use money for what?
Yeah, so is he going to use his own money for the reparations, which Kenya's president, did you say, was talking about? I'll ask that again. Hopefully you'll be able to hear me, Richard. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Richard? I think he can.
No, I'm sorry, you've broken up again.
Okay, so Richard, we have a viewer who has asked, is the King going to use his own money for reparations in Kenya?
Oh, will the King use his own money? Yes. No, I mean, that's just not going to happen, I don't think. No, that's not. I can't see that happening. No. I mean, I think the King is really. I think the King is really keen that these things aren't hidden. That people become much more aware of, for example, the royal family's, his ancestors' involvement in the slave trade. You know, going back to Elizabeth the First and some of the monarchs that followed her. But I don't think there's any desire or intention to use his own money to pay reparations or anything like that.
No, because then, of course, he sets a precedent, doesn't he? And then it will go forth. And he also has to, even though he is not a politician, he does have to sort of, he very much is representing the Great Britain in a lot of ways, so he has to be quite careful about how he treads. But yeah, that was a question asked on Twitter for us. But do keep the questions coming in on Facebook and Twitter. So, Richard, as you said, it's all go in the UK as well as in Kenya. But what more can we expect? Any surprises you can give away? There is a bit of a delay on Richard's end, but we're just about to ask him what more to expect from the rest of the royal tour, Richard, when you do hopefully eventually hear me.
I just caught the end of that. So are you asking me what else is coming up on the tour?
Yes, I was.
Okay, I got the gist of that one. I mean, so they've got one more day to go after today, and they'll be in Mombasa doing things, I think, helping the Kenyans showcase what Mombasa has to offer. And it's Kenya's second city, it lies on the Indian Ocean. It's got some lovely beaches, some very nice hotels, and a big population. I mean, I think officially about 1.5 million people here, but unofficially, sort of with all the suburbs and everything, but the metro area more like 3.5 million, as I understand it. I'm reluctant. There are various embargoes, as ever, for security reasons. You know, they're going to be in public areas, so I can't remember what has been. Certainly, you know, what we can and can't say about what they're doing tomorrow, but it's all going to be around Mombasa. And then I'm going on to Singapore to cover Prince William. So got a few days out there for covering him, out there for the for the Earthshot Prize Awards ceremony, the third ceremony, and events around that, focusing mainly on the environment. He's going out dragon boat racing one day, so that should be a bit of fun. But of course, Kate's not going to be there because George has got school exams coming up, and she wanted to be at home with him while he was preparing for those. So
right. That's the show. You know,
it's going to be interesting to see.
That motherhood, you know, being a mother to those kids is high up on her agenda, versus obviously her royal duties. If they can split the duties, then they will. I think that was a case of that there, Richard.
Sorry, I lost you.
It's okay.
The technical problem we face out on these tours.
No, that's absolutely fine, Richard. I was just saying about the fact that that Catherine puts motherhood first, whilst also juggling royal duties. But of course, they still get the job done, and William is still going out there for the tour to do this. So Richard, George is at home preparing for the exams. They've just come off on an October half term. Is there any other news from the children from the Wales's side?
Obviously, I've been out here, so I haven't been focusing on them quite so closely. But there was a really fun engagement yesterday where she went to the pub with more than a dozen blokes. With their toddlers, to a family-friendly pub in North London, and then for what they call a dad walk, and it was all about. So this was a group as like a support group for fathers, and she was keen to show her support for it because. As you know, she her sort of key mission as a member of the royal family, as she sees it over the next, well, really over the foreseeable future, is to try to create a national conversation that leads to improvement way children are years of their lives, to showcase how important it is for dads to be involved with their kids in those first 5 years. And the Royal Foundation did some research that showed that men, weren't as switched on, weren't as clued up about the key importance of those early years, the first 5 years. So it's all part of, it's campaigning work. They would see it as campaigning work. The message is all, it's very similar time after time. But I guess the challenge for Kensington Palace is to keep it fresh and keep the public interested. And I think she did that yesterday by, there was some nice lively images of her with the kids and with the dads, and she was talking about how important it all was.
And of course, she's, has close ties to, early development, and is very keen to talk about children's development and parenting, as you said, with fathers and their children and mothers with their children. But it's interesting you say this, because obviously this week on the Royal Tour, they've been meeting school students as well, the King and Queen. And this very much overlaps, I would say, with what the Wales is, completely different scenarios. But the King and Queen obviously are very keen to show that education within children everywhere around the world is very important.
Yeah, education, and it sounds weird to say it because they are a family that sit at the pinnacle of our class system in the UK, but the message that comes out from the royals increasingly is about the need to reduce inequality, both within the UK and internationally. And so yesterday, for example, the King was at an event. They went to a district of Nairobi called Eastlands, to the library there, split up. Camilla went to a literacy project. The King was meeting young people who were sort of receiving, I suppose you'd call it, tuition on entrepreneurship, and some of them were using laptop computers, and they hadn't been able to use a computer before, and that, to many kids in the West probably sounds quite strange, but one of the people involved was saying actually most of the kids had come from from rural parts of Kenya. I think they travelled for 16 hours or something to get to this event, and they'd never seen a full-length mirror before, and they'd never seen a hot shower before. They checked into the hotel the night before, and so they had to be shown how a hot shower works and whatever. And I think it's worth bearing that in mind. When you see what you think about the backgrounds of some of the people they're meeting, and that those kids were being supported by the Prince's Trust International, one of the key charities that Charles, when he was Prince of Wales, set up way back in 1976. So you see the impact they're having internationally, I think.
Does the King get emotional? Because this is a cause evidently very close to his heart, and as you said, that he's had for many, many years. So when he sees the change that is happening across the world, which has been enabled by the charity, does he express emotion off the back of that, or is he always, I hate to say it, but got a game face on?
No, he does. I mean, you can see he's quite moved at times by people's stories when people, particularly when he meets people who tell him how he helped change their lives. But I mean, there were so many different stories around yesterday. We can't be 100% sure, but we think he met the world's oldest man. This was at Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery in the morning, when he was presenting medals to 4 Second World War veterans who had, in inverted commas, lost their medals during the Kenya emergency, during the time when people were fighting for independence here, and the British colonial administration was resisting them. And some people handed their medals back in protest, their British medals, and other people hid their medals because they feared reprisals if it was known that they'd they fought for the British in the Second World War. And I think these guys were in the latter category. And certainly this one chap was who according to him, he was born in 1906 and makes him 117.
Wow.
And as far as we can tell, that would make him the oldest man ever to have lived. But the thing is, there aren't records. Records aren't very good in Kenya. The Kenyan government says it has checked it out and is satisfied that he's correct. I have to say, he was in excellent nick for somebody that old, and I think the king got quite emotional speaking to him and presenting him with replacement medals. He'd fought out in Burma and in Palestine, Egypt, and Abyssinia during the Second World War, and we'd served there. I don't think he was fighting in all the places he was based in, but yeah, it was an amazing story, I thought.
Yeah, that is an amazing story. And does the Queen get as emotional as the King?
Well, she can do. I mean, I've seen her. Going back now, just thinking about Commonwealth War Graves, way back in, I think it was 2007, maybe. We went to Egypt and went to El Alamein, where her father had served and was taken captive in 1943, I think. And she went to the gravestone of one of the people who had served with him and who I think was, if I remember rightly, was killed in the incident where he was taken captive, and she certainly shed a few tears on that day. So yeah.
Okay.
I think what you hear from the royal family all the time, I think, is that that authenticity is very important, and they have to appear authentic, and so they really sort of rile against anything that requires them to put on an act. That's not something they want to be doing at all. Although, of course, there is always a balance. There is always a balancing act because, going back to the King's speech the other night, that would reflect. I think the Foreign Office certainly helped write that, and it would have been run by the government before he spoke. So he's effectively representing British government policy, not necessarily his personal position.
So, other than that speech, Richard, has there been any other moments of not tension, because the speech didn't cause tension, but the subject surrounding it is obviously going to cause tension, and understandably so. But has there been any other moments on the tour so far which have been negatively received?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, there have been other moments where the history has come up. In fact, I covered them going to the new National Museum, where they walked through a tunnel of martyrs, and they acknowledged a couple of statues of, Kenyan freedom fighters, who would have been described as terrorists. And I was interested in that because, clearly there's been a huge amount of, it's a classic thing for journalists to discuss this, but there's been a huge amount of attention over the BBC's refusal to call Hamas terrorists back in England, and it's a really tricky issue. But I was intrigued because here we are paying tribute to these people who were being described as terrorists by the British authorities 60 years ago. just over 60 years ago. And it's always that case, isn't it, where one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. I think you always have to bear that in mind when these things are being discussed. I'm pretty sure the broadcasters would argue that you can convey the horror of things that have happened without needing sometimes to use the terminology that the politicians want you to use. And of course, for the royal family, you see both sides of this. So interestingly, a couple of weeks ago, the king described Hamas as terrorists, but here he is now sort of making amends for what was done in Britain's name all that time ago. We've seen him and we've seen his mother shaking hands with Martin McGuinness, Jerry Adams from Sinn Féin. And, Martin McGuinness is widely believed to have been the IRA chief of staff who ordered Lord Mountbatten's assassination. So there was a very personal connection there, but part of the role of the royal family is statesmanship. And, I was on that tour when the Queen went to Ireland I think it was over a decade ago, when she really sealed the Irish peace process. So although they're not politicians and they don't make the key decisions about what the UK does as a country, they do have that soft power and that ability to speak for the nation at these important moments.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's not lost on them, because they've seen over the years, that is one of the positives about having an older monarch, is they've seen how their actions can have a knock-on effect in good ways and also in bad. Okay, yes, then, Richard. You've got a busy couple of days, and then you're on to Singapore, so even more busy few days ahead. But to sum up how the tour has been going so far, it's been pretty positive. You can't give away any of the embargoes, obviously. But from the UK side, can you say anything to kind of finish us up on the Royal Roundup today?
No, I think it has been positive, and it's been a celebration of the close ties between the two countries. We haven't seen the sort of protests that we saw in the Caribbean when William and Kate went there, but I think the British government will be disappointed, perhaps, that the Kenyan president, William Ruto, chose his speech at the state banquet to essentially say that while we are good friends, we mustn't forget history, and Britain needs to do more to make amends for that history. So I think they'll perhaps be a little bit disappointed about that. But the president was very positive about King Charles, and in his view, this is all a good start in building even closer relations between the two countries.
Well, that is good news then. No pressure for the Prince of Wales when he goes to Singapore, sort of in his father's footsteps, as it were, doing an international visit. Okay then, Richard, thank you. And we're very sorry for some of the tech issues which happened in the first half of the Royal Roundup today, but that hopefully gives you a little bit of an insight as to what's been happening from Kenya and some of those juicy exclusive lines from Richard. Keep an eye on his Twitter, where you'll see all of the videos videos and pictures and the different stories coming through, as well as on our website, and of course the paper as well. Buy a paper. And if you want to catch up with any of our other episodes where we go into depth about the goings on of the royal family, then you can go onto YouTube. We premiere there every Friday. You can go onto Instagram, you can go onto Twitter, Facebook. We're all there. You'll find us there somewhere. Richard, we'll catch up with you next week, and thank you for taking the time out.